commercial. Liberty, 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 liberty. I just will have to say it every time I see her. Hey there, Liberty. We're going to go ahead and get started. And so I'll call this meeting to order at 2:05. I think we have everyone present, and we have a new potential new member or a new member.
Let's say potential.
Okay. Well, we can go around and introduce ourselves, and then you can introduce yourself to us, so we can learn a little bit more about you. So I'm Katrina Bowman, Executive Director for Northern Kentucky Community Action Commission, nonprofit organization here, serving the 8 counties in Northern Kentucky, just working with individuals, families, and communities, helping them to deal with issues of poverty, helping them to become self-sufficient, and ultimately their families to thrive through a myriad of programs and services. So that's me. Gina, I see you next.
Hello, I'm Gina Douthit. I'm the General Manager for the Transit Authority of Northern Kentucky, which is the bus system that runs here in Boone, Kenton, and Campbell counties.
Ashley.
I'm muted. Hi, everybody. Ashley Dubois, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. And Gina, it's not just the bus system, honey.
Right.
It's our only bus system, okay? So we're going to elevate all of that.
The one and only. You're it, buddy. You're it. That's all we got. You're sort of rocking it out. Oh. And then Liberty's here. She is in the role of staff support.
Yes, hi.
Okay, there, Liberty. All right, Corey, you guys can take it away over there.
All right, Corey Honor, Northern Kentucky WIB Director.
Simon Boxall, WIB Compliance and Policy Analyst.
I'm Kate Doolittle. I'm with PNC Bank and Vice President Business Banking Center. Been with PNC for over a decade now, and within Northern Kentucky for almost a year now. I cater to small business development. So anything small business oriented, from payment solutions to just checking accounts. I help with all of that.
Hey, you need to be my friend. We need to talk. I have, in addition to the NKCAC, I have a boutique, a local boutique in Covington. And so somehow through that, just organically have met a lot of people that are really micro, more smaller than small, so micro businesses. And we talk a lot about how to really get their businesses off the ground, what funding and capital is there to really invest in those micro companies. So sort of still along the lines of, you know, what we're doing here at the WIB is really figuring out how to support those micro businesses, particularly as it relates to women, minorities, and even veterans, and how to get access to that capital in that startup phase. So, you know, that may be something that we think about, like I said, Corey, even as part of our conversation with the WIB, how we could be supportive in that role. But I know that there's clearly a gap there in this community, just sort of based upon what I've heard and, you know, anecdotal analysis. But I'd love to think about that and talk more about that.
That's partially why I want to be involved in this as well, and more actually involved with the DEI committee in the chamber as well. But there's specific certifications that PNC has internally, and I have both in women in business certification as well as minority in business certification. So it's nice to have that lens and surround yourself with people who can help and see things different.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, that is so exciting. Yes, well, hopefully you'll become a full-fledged member. So welcome to our committee on today. And so do we have any members that need to self-identify? No, we don't have, the only action item that we have, thank you, is approval of the last minutes, and I think those minutes were already approved, weren't they? Because we didn't meet last month. Is that right? Or we need to approve these minutes that were attached?
They would be from the September meeting? Or, my mistake, when was that meeting?
Yeah, September 27th, I believe. So we skipped the last meeting, and so we still haven't approved September's meeting minutes yet. Okay.
We have not.
We have not.
I'll move to approve those minutes.
Okay, thank you. We have a move, we have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Everybody in favor? Aye. Thank you. Opposed? All right, motion carries. The minutes are approved. Okay, so we are moving into our committee objectives discussion. And so I want us to really go back and look at those, starting with those September minutes. Hopefully everybody has those. We had talked in that meeting really specifically about some things that we wanted to accomplish. Or Corey, I wanted to start there and then move into the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement and drill down into that to begin to think about some additional objectives that we want to accomplish. So does everybody have the minutes? Does everybody have a copy of those minutes? Yes, okay. So the first thing that we really sort of talked about was board member recruitment. And so of course, John is on this committee and he's over the membership committee as well. And we felt like based on that survey, what we heard from board members is that they really want to start thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to the membership. And so we worked with John. And so I think that's, Corey, maybe one of those first objectives is looking at that membership and being intentional about our recruitment efforts, or one of those strategies, I should say. And I think that intentionality sort of comes from those joint meetings with the membership committee. And I don't know if maybe those are quarterly but we have some standing meetings with them and really helping them to think through who are appropriate candidates to bring forward. How does that sort of sound, everybody? Sounds good. Yeah, and I think that's one, we've already started doing that, but what we probably need to do is solidify like when the dates when we are going to join in with that, with I think it's the MBE committee. I think those are the right.
MBO. Yeah.
MBO, when the dates of when we're going to join in with them. And like I said, I think maybe quarterly would be sufficient, if not even twice a year. I'm not sure how often they meet.
I think MBO meets 6 times.
Yes.
6 times a year. So
They meet every other month. Like they will meet next month, and then they'll meet 2 months after that.
Yeah. And I think what we did is we did a joint meeting, and so maybe instead of we look at with our calendar and their calendar having maybe 2 joint meetings with them, 2 or 3, so we can look at these objectives and make sure that we're staying on track and that they have eligible people to recruit from. Because I know the last time we met, they had a really significant list of diverse candidates that they said they thought it would take them a while to sort of work through and weed through. So they were feeling really comfortable about that. Everybody feel good about that? Okay. Are you good with that, Corey? You feel good about that?
yeah, that sounds great to change.
Okay. So when John, I think our action step with that is when John gets back, that we look at that jointly and say, these are the 2 to 3 meetings that we'll do together. That could be sort of our action step for that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And then the next thing that we gathered, from the board was, going back and looking at that survey, and it'd be nice to get that survey to Kate so she could see that. I know all of us have looked at that, and then it really synthesized that and looked through that information. But one thing that, became apparent from that survey is that we all, didn't have the same understanding of terms as it relates to DEI. So what we said we wanted to do was to have many trainings in each of the board meetings to really drill down on what specific words mean. And so in the minutes, you can see here, we had identified race and ethnicity, sexual orientation and identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And where we landed was that we were going to have members from the DEI take a topic and present that topic to the board to do that 10-minute presentation. And I know Ashley, which one did you do? You already went.
I did overall. So I started.
You started overall. Yes,
Yep.
you did. Thank you. You did overarching. And Gina, I know you said, did you say which one you wanted to do? You want to pick one and do it next time? Look.
Just put it all in there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what does it make sense to do next? Is it kind of breaking out diversity, equity, and inclusion next?
I think so, since that's the name of our committee, maybe just saying this is what diversity is next, and then.
So I'll do diversity.
Okay, so Gina.
Oh, are we breaking them down one by one, like spending 10 minutes on?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, we're gonna, because,
Going all in.
we're going all in till we got 10 good minutes. Oh, okay, so Gina's gonna do diversity. When will that be? When is our next meeting?
Good question.
I know, I can't keep up with meetings.
It is March 28th.
March 28th. Okay, so
That gives me lots of time to
yes,
prepare
yes.
and come and figure it all out.
That's right. I'll take equity. So I'm assuming that's May, that's my birthday. I'll be 50. I don't know. I'm not doing any work for the entire month of May.
We will hear this until May. Katrina's turning 50, everybody.
I'm turning 50 this year.
Oh my goodness.
But you're turning 50 before I'm turning 50, so.
Old one.
At least we can still, have
Walk
fun.
and talk.
That's right. We don't have canes yet.
Right. I don't know. What day is the May meeting? I'm not doing that.
She's not gonna be here. Somebody else.
It's probably the 29th on my birthday.
I don't sit on the board, so I don't have the meetings.
I thought Simon was looking it up.
I think Simon's
Yes.
looking it up.
It's the 23rd.
May 23rd.
No, it's not. I lied.
May 9th.
Oh, no, I can do that. I won't be gone yet.
Our
Well, that's
retreat.
right
on the
after my
30th.
birthday, y'all.
Ah.
I'm a Derby weekend birthday girl.
You are.
That's right. What did you say, Jean, about the retreat?
The retreat's on the 30th. You might miss that for your
Oh, I've
birthday.
already told Corey I can't do that.
Corey can't hear you.
I've already told him I can't do that.
Corey, you should not have scheduled the retreat on the week of Katrina's 50th birthday. Come on.
What is happening? I told him, Corey, like, this is a national holiday. He did it anyway. So, that's fine. And then maybe John had signed up too, so we could ask John to do inclusion.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that's July.
Now, because you're breaking these out in smaller bite-sized pieces, at what point are we tackling the language part? Because that means it's going to take us almost almost a year to get into the actual data portion of this, which was the language. People were struggling with race and ethnicity and what's the difference and terms and things of that nature. And so if we're spending a lot of time on diversity, equity, and inclusion, instead of just putting that into 1 10-minute presentation and jumping into, these are what these terms actually mean. Like, this is what we're asking you. When we are using them as the WIB, when the WIB is asking for these particular identity markers, this is what we're asking for. And then I'm assuming after that, you would send the survey back out, because now people should have the same understanding and we should get more concrete data. Is that the goal of this, or no? Because there's a lot of people that sit on this board that would know what DEI is. I think the issue was, if you say ethnicity to some people, they don't understand what that means, because it's not something we tend to use often.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's a question, I guess, to the group. You know, we had talked about it, breaking it out this way. And so I sort of thought about, in my mind, I was thinking we break all of these down, and then we have race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and identity that then we can sort of spell out the definitions of those. And maybe we all could do that together after we get these three. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out as possible. Well, I don't know what people think. Ashley, what are you thinking?
My thought would be to put DEI in 1 10-minute presentation, because it's definitions, and the WIB has a definition on their website. I'm not sure in the board orientation if people get that and if it's broken down a little bit more, but I think if we did it up front, it stops from belaboring the point, because the goal of this is for people to understand, when we are sending a survey out, we need these identity markers from you. So whether that's disability, it's veteran, it's LGBTQ status, or is it how do you identify in terms of your racial markers? And usually people go with census data racial markers. So maybe we don't use the term ethnicity because it's driving people nuts and they can't seem to figure it out. Or we just use the word race, we go with it, we do gender, and maybe that's, male, female, transgender, gender non-binary, and those are the only 4 that we go with. Or prefer not to answer. Like, prefer not to answer is always going to be on there, but we go with those 4 just to keep the data succinct. And then the goal of having all these conversations to say, we're going to send this survey back out though, because we need you to take it, so that we can actually have a actual depiction of what our board actually looks like. Other than that, we're shooting in the dark.
Well, and I can't remember off the top of my head, and maybe Simon, if you can find that. I feel like, I don't know if people really did understand diversity, equity, and inclusion. My takeaway from the survey is that they didn't, but you feel like we could do all 3 of those in 10 minutes.
I wasn't in the first conversation. So I thought the issue was the ethnicity part and not the lack of understanding the DEI part, because DEI may look different to the WIB than it would look in like community action, or may look for the chamber, because we are in different sectors. So our sectors overlap, but the sectors are different. So I don't know what the WIB is actually trying to measure with this particular survey. We harped a lot on identity markers and people not understanding identity markers. So I was trying to get there. Right. But if people really don't understand DEI, then maybe we break it out. I don't know, because I wasn't a part of the first subset of meetings.
I mean, Corey, what is your feel as you're talking with members, and where do you think our focus should be as we're thinking about our training?
Well, I'm kind of inclined to agree with Ashley, just because I also was not a part of the first conversation, because it was before I started in this position. But I feel like diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's almost helpful to have those all in one conversation, so that you can contrast, like, this is diversity and this is how it differs from equity, and this is how, this is how we really can be inclusive. And by separating them out, over the course of what will wind up being clear through July, you lose some of that effect to be able to compare and contrast the terms.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of if you think about resources too, like training resources and resources that we might pull from to help with the presentation, almost all of the resources that I would be pulling from do the comparison of the three words, basically the three concepts, so that it's very easy to understand that like diversity is about differences. And, and if you compare those things in one conversation, it may be easier for people to kind of grasp the difference.
Okay.
But I don't know that 10 minutes might not be long enough to actually have that full conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Gina. I think to do all three at once, I think we're gonna have to devote more than 10 minutes, which is fine.
So do we want to do that then in the March one? Do the diversity, equity, and inclusion all in that in the March meeting, and then give it 20 minutes? Is that 15?
Yeah, I think, can we do 20 minutes in March? I'm looking at Simon to think, I don't know what we already have sort of penciled in on the March agenda. I'm trying to think.
I don't know of anything added to the March one.
Let's do it. Let's do 20 minutes in March and we'll cover DEI. And we have to stop saying just DEI too, because I've realized pretty recently that a lot of people think the E is still equality. So it's important to also differentiate.
Say the word.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then Gina, maybe we can get together offline too and maybe do some of this together. So it's not just fully you trying to do that. You could lead it and I could sort of support you in that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I can start a presentation and get some thoughts out there, and then maybe we can go from there.
Yeah. And Ashley, I don't know if you already have something too that you could send us with the basic.
I have a lot of, I was gonna say, I have a lot of stuff we can pick and kind of put it together. Now, what I will say is for Corey, your team needs to be prepared to answer the questions. So we wouldn't be able to answer the questions because we may not have all the information. So if they say, okay, well, you saying equity is this, what does that look like to the WIB? We wouldn't be able to answer that. You all would have to come equipped, ready to answer those questions. So if you're not comfortable getting it done by March, then I would say we talk about something else in March, and you all have to be comfortable by May, just so that we all fully understand that if people ask us questions, I can answer them on behalf of the chamber. Gina can probably answer them on behalf of Tank, Katrina for NKCAC, but we can't answer on behalf of the WIB what equity means to the WIB internally, because that might be a lot of those questions. Not why does the word exist? How are we using and quantifying the word is usually where people tend to go first.
Right. No, that's a great point, actually. And I think I know what our response would be to that, but let's do it in March. I'm
Okay.
ready to go in March.
Okay.
Great.
And
So
Ashley,
then
I think
we'll put all of those then together. Have Gina as the lead. We'll back her up on that presentation, and then we'll try to get that to you, to Corey and the staff ahead of time. So then if we need to talk through that too, we can, and make sure that we are, what we're presenting is in alignment with, your thoughts, Corey, and if questions come up, we're prepared to answer them as, with a unified front on how we're addressing these.
Absolutely. And I was just talking with Kate because she's fresh off of her new board member orientation. I think it was Ashley who mentioned the importance of really talking about the work of the DEI committee with new board members so that they have a complete understanding of what this work, of the work that we're trying to do. We do a really quick sort of overview of a number of the committees that we have under the WIB. And so maybe part of what our work is going forward is to better flesh out the work. Well, that's gonna be part of our conversation today is to define the objectives of the committee. But to make those objectives and the work of the committee better known to board members and not just kind of skim over it, you know.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I think that's it, for sure. Okay, and so then if we're doing all of those in March, then that would give us May and July to deal with these other issues. So we've got race and ethnicity, and then sexual orientation and identity will be July. How do y'all feel about, do you feel like that's spaced out too far? What do y'all think about that?
Say that again, you would do,
I was just looking at this list, race and ethnicity and May and sexual.
I think that makes sense.
And then maybe with that July, because what we talked about was sort of having a wrap up, because that's your year starts in, are you on a fiscal year like that? Is it July, Corey?
Yes.
Okay, so we could sort of do, after we do that race, as part of that sexual orientation and identity, that July, then we can do sort of that recap of everything that we've done. And, Ashley mentioned this, and this is, you don't have to decide right now, but, Corey, do we want to send that survey back out, and we probably need to talk, about how that survey and there was a lot of conversation around the survey and a lot of meetings, extra meetings we had to go through about the survey. So we really need to think about that. Do we want to send the survey back out? I think it's a good idea after we go through it to maybe people will have a better understanding of what it is and why we were doing it. But just something I want us to think about and talk about as maybe a pending action step after you have some time to sort of think about the history of it and where we want to go with this information.
Yeah, first thought, I think it is a good idea to resend the survey once everybody has a better understanding and has a common understanding, I should say, of all of the terms that we're talking about, because I know one of our objectives, right, is to be intentional about having a diverse board. And we need to have accurate information about the composition of the board. And I don't think we have that right now.
Yeah. And so the survey results really is to establish our baseline. So that we know we're able to measure if we are making any real meaningful gains in this area as it relates to board membership. And so I sort of think, to me, that is really the purpose of all of this training, is to educate the members on these definitions, so then we can put that survey out so we can establish what is our current baseline as it relates to the board membership. Since the board members did say they wanted to start this journey in dealing with specifically the board makeup.
To that point, for Corey and team, when you kind of did this like short introduction before I did the presentation, I would reiterate similar to what Katrina just said, and you can put it in very bite-sized pieces, but letting people know now from March until July at every training session, the reason for these trainings is to do X, Y, Z, and then we're going to send the survey back out now that we have level set. We put everyone on the same like standard set starting place. Now we're going to resend the survey out. So we're encouraging you to take that survey. We're going to have it open for so much time. But if you tell people the why now, then they fully understand where they're going through their trainings. One, they need to be listening. And then two, they have to know that there's something at the back end that we need you to do. So we just start telling them in March, they can hear it again in May, they'll hear it one more time in July. Then I'm assuming as of your new fiscal, you're sending out this new survey saying, this is our new board. We are going to go through this survey. And then we can present the data back to them and say, now everyone kind of has a better understanding as to what we did and how our board is comprised. So then we know what changes or additions and subtractions we need to make in the next board cycle.
Great.
That's good. I think that's very well said. Yeah. So those were the actions that we have identified up to this point. And so I just wanted to make sure before, as we go into this discussion about additional objectives, that we didn't overlook the things that we've already talked about. We keep those as important objectives for us to accomplish.
I 100% agree with that. I don't want to place any current objectives. And I think it's important for us to think about, I mean, these don't have to be the objectives that live forever within this committee. I mean, we can evolve. We need to have some realistic objectives to be able to accomplish, I would say, in the first year, let's say roughly, right? So once hopefully we're not still talking about educating our board 5 years from now, right? On
Right.
So we'll have to adjust as we move forward. And I think these two are very important. The ones that, number one, being intentional with recruitment efforts to make sure our board is diverse and represents our community and probably beyond our community, actually, just because our community is, in Northern Kentucky particularly, is just very white. So I know that we want to strive to match our Northern Kentucky demographics, but also, as mentioned, I took some notes here, working closely with our MBO committee to make sure that our objective is being recognized and paid attention to. And then educating our board, of course, we just got done talking about that. And then now, I think we've reached the point where I would love to have one more actionable objective. I have a thought, but I want to hear others' thoughts too. So.
And I think everything that we just talked about, when we think about, what is the objective, it is ensuring that I think all of these are sort of like points under the main objective is really making sure that the WIB, and I think you said it, is reflective of the communities that we're serving, and that we're considering them in all of the decisions that are being made for our community. And I think that's, the larger, and then all of these points are sort of falling under that particular objective, if that makes sense.
We do have community demographics. I mean, if they're readily available, but we don't have it in front of us right now.
I know, for instance, in Kenton, the average in Kenton, Boone Campbell, 92% white, 6% African American, and the rest is, other populations. That's based upon the last bit of census data that I saw. So that's about where we are. And so if we're, looking at that, because for me and my board, we have to be minimum or reflective of that. But of course, then we set higher benchmarks, once you meet that, so you are reflective of your community, then you begin to, set yourself stretch goals, again, to broaden the voice of those communities that are underserved. So, we could potentially start there. And like I said, that's the last data that I had as it relates to, race.
And something you mentioned, Katrina, when we talked, I think it was the end of the day Friday, you kind of reminded me that there are other, demographic categories that we need to pay attention to other than race. So we're thinking about disability status or even age diversity. So we could probably, when you're talking about that umbrella category that everything kind of feeds up into, maybe broaden the statement a little bit to be, you know, to include those other categories as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you do that, then I would just change it from race or racial to underrepresented groups. Or you can put underrepresented identity groups, because
Mhm.
LGBTQ falls into that, disabilities falls into that, veteran falls into that. So those are those other identity markers that people can easily and quickly identify with that are technically considered underrepresented groups.
Yeah.
Women are in there as well, but like it becomes an intersectionality of identities. Like you might have a couple that go with each other or all of them, depending
Mhm.
on the person. So
Right. And we did have some people that said, I forgot, that did, identify with many different ones. So for sure, I think that's important. So I think, to me, in my mind, as we're thinking about strategy, I think that's, and now I'm moving over to the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. And so I think, Corey, that what we've talked about, that sort of hits that board governance. The strategies that we've identified directly relate to the board governance. And so in my mind, I think there should be a strategy for each of these where we have, and I don't know if everybody has this form, but on here it says that this is the strategic plan elements. There's employer services, there's job seeker services, board governance, and then data-driven decision making. And so, like I said, in my mind, I'm thinking we should have a strategy for each one of these areas. Does that make sense? people? Corey, what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, I think that does make sense. I'm thinking because you kind of talked about the four main categories under the strategic plan elements. And I sort of have I do have a draft version of some of the things that I'd like to put in front of the executive committee meeting, in front of the executive committee the next time we have a meeting, in terms of subcategories under each of these four, if you will. And so DEI specifically falls under board governance, but I didn't put like separate. So you're talking about having a DEI objective under each of the four: employer, job seeker, board governance, and data-driven decision making.
That was my thought.
Okay, that we certainly could. My main goal is to, whatever we come up with, I want to do it. I want to. I don't want to just have it written down, right?
Yeah.
That's I'm always going to push back, and it's like, let's just not write it down to have something under each category. Let's,
Mhm. Well, and I think some of these are easier than others. So when I look at, for instance, the job seeker services, you already have monitor and assess outcomes of individuals utilizing Career Center and WIOA services. And I think it's really just breaking that down further, where you say individuals, but we may just pull out or include something in here, so we know that we're looking at populations of people that are normally underserved. So, so it's not just individuals, but we're breaking that category down even further. So I think I've asked that question before. Is this data broken down by race? Is it broken down by, some of these other categories that Ashley has identified? So then we can truly see who is actually being served. When we know, the data shows us that that I think that the unemployment rates, for instance, for African Americans is almost twice as high as it is for white Americans. So, are we intentionally serving those that are underserved? And can we highlight that here, and then give that back to our operator to at least begin to collect that? Again, I think we're starting with collecting baseline data. And they, for that category as well as for that category in particular.
Yeah, no, I think we can. Thinking about, let's just talk about jobs. So,
I can't hear Corey. You went out for, can y'all hear him? Maybe it's just me.
everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Am I loud enough?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to blast anybody out, put the mic too close to me. I didn't have a loud voice anyway. I've been talking for the last couple of years, when I was still the operator even, about how we can best begin to identify where there are disparities in our outcomes. It all starts with data collection. Because if you don't collect the right data, you're never going to wind up figuring out whether or not you have disparities in your outcomes. And this is just so that everybody's on the same page in terms of the data that we have. This is not to say that we couldn't take different measures to get additional data, but the data that we're collecting right now on race and ethnicity is via the satisfaction surveys that are completed by the people who are walking out the door of the career selection. That level of data is not collected for every single person that gets services. So we roughly, I think we were about 8.5% survey completion rate. We strive for 10%. So if you're thinking about real meaningful data, I don't want to be misleading. I don't want to say, okay, well, 50% of the people we serve are African American. Well, yeah, but we only get responses from 8.5%. So we're really, you know what I mean? So that's just kind of where we're at now. Not to say that that's where we need to be in the end, but just so that everybody's singing from the same songbook here on data.
Well, and Corey, this is a question more than anything, but is that for instance, I know for me and many other nonprofits, that's just part of the information that we collect during the intake. Everybody normally is required for any type of programming to do some type of intake. Is our question to the operator to say we want that included? I mean, that's something that people are used to asking. It's not a question that's, out of left field. And I'm not sure if the RFP has already gone out, and you probably don't get down into that level of detail in the RFP, but I feel like that's something that we could set as a goal for the operator to include those questions in the intake.
We certainly could. Yeah, that conversation, the RFP is going out already, but I don't think that matters, honestly, because this is something that we can implement with whoever wins the contract. It doesn't need to be like a mandate per se in the RFP. The short answer is yes, I think we can get there. It's not the first time that's been discussed, and what it's come down to is efficiency upon check-in. When we kind of, when the operator and customer service staff at the career center are checking in customers, for efficiency's sake, they basically collected the main points of information, like who are you, what agency are you here to see, and like 2 other questions. And the staff were filling that out on behalf of the customer, and they were collecting that information via conversation with the customer, right? So we talked about collecting race and ethnicity data during that time, but we didn't want it to be an assumption on the part of staff by putting in racial information that's what the customer he themselves wouldn't agree with. So that was one of the things that we were worried about. And then we were thinking, well, if we put the onus on the customer to check themselves in, that's another avenue we could go. It just decreases efficiency. That's why we landed on, well, let's try to collect this information at exit when the customer does a satisfaction survey, but then we ran into the low representation in terms of data, collected. So we could definitely revisit that, but that's just where we're at right now.
Yeah. And like, we see the same people that you all see and many other organizations in Tank too, you see our same people. I think people are used to answering that question. And so whatever format you have to put that in, I do think, like you said, it's much better on the front end. Once people get the service, they're gone. It's over. But I do think it will be worth it to put it in that initial intake in whichever manner, the operator feels is most conducive.
So Katrina, how do you collect that data? I mean, is it a 5-question survey on the front end that they get as part of their kind of onboarding, or not onboarding, but intake process?
When they come in as part of their intake, we're asking them your name, your number, your address, your race, your ethnicity. We ask all those questions. We just ask the question as part of that whole intake.
And I'm sure the operator's asking some of those questions. So it might be a matter of adding 3 pieces of data to an already existing process.
And then that's just part of the intake. And so we collect that, and then you can run reports based on that information that you've entered.
Yeah, I think that's totally doable. That will get us certainly better data on individuals served.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about identifying disparity in outcomes, that's a whole other conversation. That's a bigger thing, because we don't, we can have somebody come in the door that just wants to do a job search, and frankly, we never know what their outcome was. But then we have more intensive level services where we are able to identify if the person was successful with their goals. So,
and I think that's probably where you want to focus your efforts on outcomes, because you can't do just the person that walks in off the street, but for those completions, then I would think if they have that information at the intake, then that information is going to follow them all the way through their outcome. It's how I would assume that the technology works. And so once you get to the outcome, if you enter that information at the onset of the intake, then you would have that information for those that do get the outcome.
yes, so for those most intensive level services, like our registered customers, you'll sometimes hear that term. We have names attached with outcomes. For the vast majority of the folks coming in for a workshop or job search, or even basic career coaching that might not ever get registered, so to speak, all of the data that's collected in the door is not attached to a name. It's just, what am I looking for? Not confidential, but not attached to a name.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a larger issue. Like you said, I feel like everything should be attached, because you need to know everything, to give yourself credit for everything that you're doing. But that's different. But I think for this conversation, then, that what we're saying is we want to create a baseline. I think similar to what we said with the board members. We're doing that training to establish to get them to complete that survey, so we can then have a baseline to help us to know which way to go as it relates to recruitment. I think we're saying the same thing here under the job seekers, is that we want them to include those questions to establish that baseline, so then we can see what population we are actually serving, and then develop strategies to get to those, or to serve the populations that we're not. Simon, I hope you got this, because I can't. keep you straight.
It's recorded, so we gonna have to go back and watch it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
I-
to Katrina's point, though, I do think, because I'm not sure if you should, are you trying to spell out a DEI something in each one of these bullet points, or because also under board governance, it says that there's something called a DEI action plan. So is this action plan supposed to be a governing action plan over all of these outcomes, which then could spell out an identity marker of some sort in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, disability, veteran. But then I think you could also go into educational level, because that's in here. And if they've secured a higher level of educational attainment, poverty level, right? If people say I make so much money, like we can fully understand in context, the government tells us what poverty levels are. So because you know, like this is such a large thing that you all are taking on, you may need some variety and breakdown. It's not gonna all be racial. It's not gonna all be sexual based, you know, like sexual orientation based. It's not gonna be that. It's going to be a multitude of things that you would need to capture. And if you have not, you probably have the data somewhere, but if you have not been explicitly asking it, then people, if you ask it one off, it seems weird. Like, why are you asking me now? Why, how much money I make versus, you know what I mean? But if you ask me all at the same time, I'm assuming this is for a reason. Like you need all of this information for a reason. And I think now in 2023, we're so used to answering it. I mean, you answer that on everything. Where did you go to school? How much education do you have? How do you identify like your range of money? Like they are asking that on so many different applications for a variety of reasons that I think it would be easier to ask it on the front end. But if there's going to be a DEI action plan, we might just need to put that in the action plan, which will help achieve the things in the job seekers, in the employee service. Like it'll help achieve some of those things because there is an overarching plan. And that might give us just, this may need to be over like 2 years because you already have a base of people that you've been serving. And then there'll be a new base of people going through this new survey or intake form procedure. So it's going to take time to level that back out. And I would say it's going to take about 18 months to 2 years.
And I sort of see what we're doing now as creating our action plan. Like
Okay.
that's sort of, yeah, like what we talked about with the board, what we're talking about with the job seekers, I think, you know, and then if we do the employer services, the data driven, I know we got 3 minutes, so we won't get to those. But I think when we put all of those elements together, then in my mind, that is our action plan. And then we can delve into, like you're talking about, Ashley, okay, then going into what are those markers and what are all of those other things that need to be included. But that, in my mind, is sort of that first step to completing that action plan.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And good news, Katrina, we have 32 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, we can get through these last 2. I thought it was only 3.
Yeah, I would eventually like to circle back to the outcomes discussion and identifying disparities, because like I said, it's something that I feel it's very important.
Yeah.
It's just super complicated when maybe it's just that we're talking about our subcontractor customers, like, you know, for example, right now, Brighton sent its customers, but we're dealing with 16 partners. 3 of them are state partners. To get them to, I mean, it's frankly, we're not going to get that information from both.
No.
And we're not going to get, you know what I mean? So it's like, we've got to pick our, you know, so ultimately what we can do is, let's just say we get 100 people come in the career center today. We can get to a point where we're collecting demographic information on the front end. That's not a terribly hard thing to do. We can accomplish that. So at least we know who's being served. When it comes to the outcomes, that's a whole different conversation. Maybe we just need to hone in on, okay, well, 12 of these 100 people came in to see Brighton Center to get through We Owe $1. And out of those 12, what are our outcomes looking like? And how do we break it down by demographic category? I think we could eventually get there. But
Yeah.
just to kind of be realistic.
Yeah, I agree, Corey. That's huge, especially you know, you gotta get your technology lined up. You gotta, you know, decide on what are the key outcomes and key programs that we want to look at that we feel are most impactful, and then deciding to drill down into that too. But I agree, because your outcomes is your most important thing. It's fine that, you know, 1,000 people walked into the career center, but I mean, who was really impacted by that?
Yeah.
That's what makes the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I know Gina's got to go. Bye, Gina. Thank you. Thanks so much.
I'll be in touch.
Okay, sounds good. Before May. Oh, she's gone. Before May. And so I think we have time to look at these last two. And if anybody has any thoughts about it as we think about employer services, and Kate, you may have some things that you want to chime in here too, as it relates to this upskill, and sort of what my mind goes to is this upskilling and hiring. And that last word says access and deploy WIO resources as available to support hiring and upskilling. Because as I think about our region, this is just, again, sort of anecdotal. When I think about, you know, who are in executive level positions, there's very little diversity. I mean, I can't hardly think of any. Like when Ashley and I were talking about this, and she was like, "You're it. You are the whole diversity when it comes to executive level in the region." And I was like, wait a minute, is she right? Like, am I really truly the only executive director president in Northern Kentucky that's of color? I'm like, it can't be true, but I can't think of anybody. And Corey, maybe you can.
No, I can't. And you know, it's kind of discouraging if you think about it like that. And admittedly, so that's not something I think a lot about. But when you asked me not too long ago, Katrina, this one of the 10 different awards that you got in the last year, one of the person of color that's ever been on the WIB executive committee. I'm like, oh man, really? Is that where we're at? Like, yeah, I guess you are.
I was like, I wonder. Yeah.
So yeah, it's hopefully we'll be having a different conversation 5 years from now, but that's where we're at right now. So, you know.
And you know, maybe this is where we can tie, I think, into what is the chamber is doing, because as we think about employers, this is sort of a commonality between the chamber DEI and, you know, WIB DEI. And so Ashley, I don't know, you know, as you look at these, because a lot of what you hear from the chamber is about this talent recruitment and this, you know, removing barriers to employment. If there's some strategies that you have at the chamber that we might be able to sort of glean off of here as it relates.
So that's actually a Nancy thing. So Nancy works in that particular population, which I think would be still a really good tie into it. So the lens is still an equitable lens that we're looking through. It's just that I am not spearheading that work. But I do think that that's a really good like touch point for us to come together and collaborate. And maybe it's me, Nancy, and you know, a few other people that really start to talk through that, so that the WIB doesn't have to try to recreate the wheel. We're doing it. We can give you all the things that we're doing. I know GROW is a huge part of that. And so, you know, we're big on the 3 Ps, people, policy, procedure. So in that pillar 5, policies and procedures, it's affecting the people. So that's what we're really working on. And we just put numbers into it because GROW is hard to quantify. It's hard to talk about, but it's hard to quantify. And so in pillar 5, we decided to take the lead and say, we need numbers. We need something that says after X amount of time, we should be able to say that we did X amount of work and this, how many people got impacted. If not, we're just spinning our wheels, having meetings all the time. So what we have an outline now that we can share with the WIB, and then you all can use that data as it pertains to your business community, at least.
What do you think about that, Corey?
Yes, I think
Since, since they're all, that is their main, did you say so? I didn't hear you. Did you say something, Kate?
Collaboration that, as this, we start building these things out for the DEI committee here, we can use some of the work that the chamber has done and Ashley's expertise as well in this, and be able to incorporate and collaborate together. So we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's perfect for employer strategies that will work with the chamber DEI to try to come up with some common goals around employer services that overlaps, all of our areas.
That's perfect. This the last thing we want to do is be going in a different direction, especially knowing that good work is already happening. Let's
Mhm.
ourselves to that and try to advance that. So. The one thing I want to make sure we have a minute to talk about before we end is like part of the conversations I hope to start having over the next 6 months or so is the WIB's role in advocacy, and keeping in mind that we cannot lobby. We're never going to weigh in on any specific bill, but I think there is room for advocacy.
Mhm.
And I also realize that the chamber has advocacy efforts happening concurrently as well. So again, we don't want to go in a different direction or duplicate, but I think there's room for us to hone in on a couple issues that we know are particularly impactful for workforce. And the two issues that I would just kind of want to throw out there is early childhood education and services, right? The importance of
Mhm.
getting kids into early childhood experiences early and having enough public financial support to enable that to happen. And immigration policy, which is where the DEI stuff comes in. Right now I know there's a limited amount of stuff that we can do as a state when it comes to immigration policy, but there are things that we can do to make it easier for immigrants to get on the pathway to work. I know a lot of this advocacy needs to happen at a federal level, but Ashley, this probably better than anybody else. We need people, right? If not for immigration, we would have like a net zero population. I mean, our any uptick that we've had whatsoever has been almost exclusively had to do with immigration, right? So, but the problem is we're not making it easy for immigrants to get into work. We're making it extremely difficult. So, is there an opportunity for us, starting at the DEI committee level, and then hopefully, bubbling up to the WIB level? Can we think about an advocacy objective that has to do with immigration?
I think most definitely. I think you said it, was very well said. Is that, we've got to have, this is workforce investment board. We've got to have a workforce.
Yeah.
And so I think, as you said, both of those things, early childhood, I'm a huge proponent for that as we, as part of what we do, with Head Start, and both immigration. So I think to me that those sort of fall under that board governance cap, as being really showing ourselves as strong leaders in this community by identifying our advocacy issues. I think that's, something, I think that's part of that piece is showing the strong leadership that's needed to say these are two areas where there needs to be some significant investment to make sure that we have the workforce that we need to be leading and cutting edge to get people to come to our community.
Yeah.
And we stay away from the word immigration at the chamber because people don't like it. So we say immigrant integration. They're already here. We just would love for them to be more integrated into our community. And if they did come illegally, we don't have a stance on that. We just want people to be able to have the proper paperwork to be able to go to work, be productive citizens, and kind of do things what we would call the right way. So get the correct paperwork so people can be legal here. They're not living in fear. People can pay taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But immigration's hard for people to talk about because it's so polarizing. So that's why we tend to try to stay away from the polarizing sides of it. They're already here. And there's a larger community that we might know about. We have about 10,000 Asians in one community that pretty much keep to themselves and work with themselves and, take care of themselves. We have a huge Guatemalan population that's moved in. We have a huge Venezuelan population that is starting to come now. And so as we learn more about these communities and them taking care of themselves, they will find work. What we're trying to work with them, and I work with a young lady named Teresa Cruz. She has an organization called Fiesta, which I think she's trying to get incorporated as its own 501c3. But for now, she's pulling together people saying who is willing to work with people with ITIN numbers, which is like a business number, so that they can pay taxes because they want to work, they need to take care of their families, and they want to be in this community. But if they're having to jump through too many hoops, essentially you pack up and move somewhere else because you need to find work to take care of your family. So yeah, we're doing what we can, but we're also trying to tackle that as best as we can as a chamber because it's a polarizing topic.
And I think, Corey, I think that is, when we think about DEI, what we said initially is that we would have, thank you, Kate. So nice to meet you. Bye.
I'm so sorry.
We understand. Have a good day. I think what we said, Corey, is that there will be two pieces of this DEI committee. One that would focus on internal, and then two would be the external, and that's where we come into this partnership with the chamber. And I think because the chamber has done a lot of work on this. How did you call it, Ashley? Not immigration. You said something else.
Immigrant integration.
They've done a lot of work on this immigration, and so I think you can say, as we are partnering with the chamber as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we want to take on these two advocacy issues that the chamber has identified as two of the most pressing issues to get workforce here, because they have identified early childhood and as well as this issue around immigration. So I think that's a way to pull on the data that they already have and to say we're going to really strategically partner with the chamber as they are advocating for these two issues. And I think isn't Gina our representative there?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, that's sort of my thought with that. So again, we're not recreating the wheel, but we're sort of joining forces to say, as a WIB board, we are going to work strategically and intentionally on these two particular advocacy topics with the chamber.
I think that makes sense. And thank you for the new term. I'm going to have to start using that. Immigrant integration. I like it.
I will give all credit to Lisa Snyder, who used to be Mokai. That was her thing, because immigration is a funny word in this community.
Yeah, because I think Lisa did a huge study, and she had all kind of data around who was here, who was coming, how to grow. So I think
you all need it.
Yeah, there's a lot of information there. So I think that is how that could be presented back to the WIB board to say, as that second part, our partnership with the Chamber DEI, these are the two advocacy issues that we really are want to make sure that we're highlighting as a WIB that are significant to us, and we'll intentionally work with the Chamber on.
Awesome. Sounds good to me. I appreciate it. We're dropping members, so I guess if the three of us agree, then we're good.
It's done. Gee. Oh, well, I feel like we've covered all of these. I think that data-driven decision-making really ties into what we talked about with their job seeker services, because, you know, it's the data that's gonna drive, you know, once we see that data, it's gonna help us be more informed on how to improve our services to those job seekers. So I really see 2 and 4 together.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I'm glad this is recorded because I don't want to have to try to go back and remember anything I said. Nothing. I'm getting ready to be 50. I told that that's my excuse for everything. I'm getting ready to be 50. I can't remember everything I said.
Do you already have KPIs somewhere that you're using?
Yeah.
For DEI or for just general?
Well, yeah, in the second bullet, update financial and programmatic KPIs and analyze regularly through the WIB and its committees. Do we already have something that we're looking at?
Yeah, they do, but there's, you know, I mean, I think they try to update them and they're continuing to work on those, but there's nothing on there about any of the stuff we're talking about. It doesn't break the data down in that way.
It's a constant work in progress, it seems, but and that's going to continue this year, I know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is because I think, again, we keep talking about establishing a baseline of data. We would need some sort of baseline, but I think this, when you talk about data, you have to put numbers in there. So are we increasing something? Are we decreasing something? Do we want to have another layer? So a lot of people are saying, like, your boards need, for some of you are the nonprofit board, you have to have 100% engagement from your board before you apply for a grant. Because if your board's not bought in, they don't want to give you anything. Like, so is that going to be an indicator? Is it that the people on the WIB board have, like, we need to figure out what that is so we can start to figure out it. And then financially, who are you giving your money to? Like, what are, maybe it's the communities that they're serving versus their boards, but what does that look like? And if we don't have any baseline data, it is hard to have data-driven decision-making because you don't know where you started, but then we really have no idea where we're trying to go to.
Right.
So if I know I need to make 30%, my goal is 30%. Like, that's all I'm thinking about all the time is getting to 30%. But if we don't have something that's kind of there, like that finish line piece for us, at least for the first year, maybe it's 2 years, then we don't really know what kind of work it's going to take, what kind of data we're going to need, what kind of communication plan. Like, we don't know what we need to have in place because we don't have a number to get to. So it's easily to put in the back of my mind because there's nothing for me to strive for. And it's probably not attached to anybody's performance goal at the end of the year. So everyone is responsible for achieving this 30% and telling people how all of the work is making sure that we achieve it. And I'm using 30% as a random number, but like how we achieve this actual goal. So that's why I wanted to ask to see what we're really trying to accomplish with that one specifically, because money is in it.
Right.
And money drives people.
Well, you know, I 100% agree. We don't have the baseline. And so we have to get the baseline because I could say 5%, but what 5% of what? We have no baseline. And so we have to establish that baseline. And I think, you know, and then I think once we get that baseline, then we can say, okay, now we have this baseline, we need to incorporate this into those key indicators. So then we can see, but I mean, we don't have any baseline at all. And Corey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not, like, they're not asking these questions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Part of the discussion at the last business service meeting was the importance of having benchmarks on our KPI data, because we have a lot of data that we're tracking, but you know, to both of your points, it's difficult to know if we've met our goal if we have no goal on paper. So, someone might have a goal in mind somewhere, but you know.
Yeah.
So that's why I know that KPI is going to be undergoing another adjustment here in the near future.
This was a good meeting. They missed a really good meeting. This was so good.
I feel like we accomplished a lot.
A lot.
You feel good, Corey?
Good, yeah, thanks for the good discussion.
Yeah, okay, so, somebody's gonna write all these minutes up and send them out. I'm not gonna look at any person in particular, Simon, but.
Looking forward to rewatching this last hour and 20 minutes.
Right.
I usually put them to go about double the speed that they were, so a little bit easier.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. Meeting adjourned, 3:20.
Yeah.
Woo.
Bye.
Yeah.